Europe, a continent as diverse as the ideas and dreams of its scientists. Featuring a great history in social and natural sciences, Europe today also faces the challenges and possibilities of a globalized scientific community. To support young, dedicated scientists from all over the world, the EU has created the European Research Council. The organization's core values represent the finest traditions of modern science.
Science is all about discovery. It's an attitude that it's not just important to know what's already known, but to learn and discover what is not known. So we really have to trust the young. We have to give them the message that Europe encourages them to come and stay in Europe and help Europe be one of the major centers of science in the world.
The ERC now supports hundreds of scientists at doing the frontier research of their dreams.
Amphibians are very exciting animals. That's why I decided to quit my job as a brewing engineer and study them full-time.
I have two passions, music and science. I choose science as my profession, but now with this research I will be able to combine the two.
Right now I'm just sorting vegetables, but on a larger scale, sorting is really fundamental to the wealth of nations.
And I realized that the economists were typically the ones who had the most interesting things to say. So for that reason I started studying economics.
I always had a passion about books, and now, as a scholar, I feel fortunate to work with the most precious Hebrew manuscripts from medieval Iberia.
Statistically, earthquakes hit Italy every 7 years, killing people and destroying buildings. To prevent this, our goal is to understand the physics of earthquakes.
When I was a child, I used to drive my parents crazy by constantly asking them questions about how things work. Now I'm finding answers about how molecules work using a next-generation mass spectrometer.
A field trip leads Dr. Frankie Boussuit and his students into a swamp near Brussels, where they find these little creatures.
The idea is to do behavioral tests with these newts. So it's known that they have pheromones, and we're going to test how exactly they work, what molecules are involved and what are they doing.
Pheromones are proteins that function as messengers. They can be used to attract the opposite sex or mark a territory. Some can also kill. Until this day, very little has been known about pheromones and frogs and newts. Frankie is among the first to do research in this new field. Frankie's lab is located at the University of Brussels. Here he wants to decode not only domestic frog pheromones, but amphibious pheromones from all over the world. The question is, how differently have frogs and newts from different continents evolved during evolution? In order to find out, his team needs to isolate the pheromones and then verify their specific function.
We just put a female frog in the middle, and now we're giving it the choice between two fake frogs at both sides. And at one side we have put water, and at the other side we put what we think might be a pheromone. And so now we hope that this frog will choose the right side.
Before following his passion, Frankie worked as a beer brewing engineer. Finally, he quit his job and did his PhD. The grant has helped him realize his first independent project.
The ERC grant gives me the opportunity to do what I really wanted to do. As a scientist, you can have many ideas, but you always need money to really do it. So now I can attract people to help me in the field. I have money to go in the lab and to think of big things, molecular research. So I can really do what I have in mind, and that's very important. 5 years of not thinking about money, just doing research.
In the Dutch town of Groningen, Dr. Amagan Kocher works on the yet unsolved question of how our hearing and touching senses work.
We don't know much about the molecular mechanisms of hearing and touching. They both involve the sensation of mechanical forces. In that case, they are quite related, but we still don't know how they are working at the molecular level yet.
Both senses use applied pressure, either through direct force or through air vibrations that are detected and transmuted into nerve impulses. Armagan came to the Netherlands hoping for better research possibilities than in Turkey. Now she has joined the scientific race to explore mechanosensation.
It's a long-lasting question, and there are many teams in the world trying to solve the problem. But here at the University of Groningen, we can use chemistry to replace the mechanical forces. And with that, we can go beyond the limits of technical issues at the moment.
The ERC grant gave Armagan the unique opportunity to realize this completely new approach.
We can also have knowledge about how we are hearing at the molecular level, but it needs a lot more work than this, of course, yeah.
Our aim is to discover. The excitement of discovery is really what all science is about, as well as the possibility that that discovery will be useful for humanity.
More than 1,000 kilometers away, Dr. Esperanza Alfonso is roaming the remains of what was once the biggest and proudest synagogue on the Iberian Peninsula. After living in Toledo for more than 700 years, its community members were expelled from Spain around the time when Columbus discovered America.
What we try to do as a team is to reconstruct the intellectual history of Jews in the late Middle Ages in context that is in constant interaction with the Islamic and the Christian cultures in the peninsula. Just looking at the Hebrew book as a cultural object, it allows us to ask a number of questions about how people lived at the time.
Esperanza is fluent in Hebrew, Aramaic and Arabic. Her main research sources are medieval Hebrew books, handwritten by Jewish scholars who have disappeared from Spain long ago.
I have always liked books, and I have had a passion for books, and particularly for Spanish literature. And in studying Spanish literature, I think that Hebrew literature is a very important component.
Some of those books can be found in Spain's lively capital, Madrid. Manuscripts that have not left the peninsula or were later brought back. Here at the historic library of the University of Madrid, Esperanza has the opportunity to do research on these ancient Hebrew texts. The manuscripts are kept in a high security vault and taken out only for special research projects.
I mean, you feel that you are going through the same experience that the people that produce these books, because you see the stains sometimes and you see the history of that book. Many of these books are very symbolic objects in themselves, and they have a history of their own, and some of them were seized by the Inquisition, and some of them left with the people who left the peninsula. So for me, it's like going through the lives of those who produced them.
In Stockholm, Dr. David Strömberg is enthusiastic about texts as well. But he prefers more recent ones, or more precisely, very up-to-date ones. Newspapers and everything else produced by the mass media. But that's not all. David is interested in the media at large. He wants to find out if local politicians who are often in the media work harder than politicians who are less present in the day-to-day news.
So the news media are becoming increasingly international. And I, for example, know more about President Obama than I know about my local politician. So the question is, what is it that our local politicians are doing now that we're increasingly not watching through the news media?
With the help of the ERC grant, David has compared gigabytes of statistics from local constituencies.
Obviously, as researchers, we're all very curious about the answers, and this money really gives me much better chance to find these answers about how does media impact politics. So in that sense, to satisfy that curiosity.
An economist by heart, David measures the local politician's success in the amount of tax money flowing back to his local constituency. Turns out the media has an impact.
So the more local coverage a politician gets in the press, the harder he works, and the harder he works specifically for his local constituency. If they're not very much in the press, then they work on foreign policy issues, which might be very interesting, but of less importance maybe to many local constituencies.
In plain language, a politician frequently in the press works harder to get funding for that new football field back home than his colleague who is rarely heard of. On the south shore of the European continent, economist Jan Eckhout has just settled in. He recently moved to Barcelona from the US, where he had been working on his theory of matchmaking and sorting for the last 8 years.
Sorting is everywhere. If you think about this marketplace, there's sorting in terms of the goods that are being offered. You can think of people buying organic foods or non-organic foods, and there's different people who buy very different things. So in the end, this turns up in these combinations of who buys what and the implied prices. And if you're really carefully thinking about this, sorting is really a fundamental mechanism of the marketplace.
This concept has long been denied by economists. Jan has proven the opposite. Sorting and matchmaking have indeed a fundamental impact, especially if it fails.
The market determines what is the right exact type of product that you want to buy, or what is the right type of person you want to hire. What can go wrong is that someone ends up with a product that's really not right for the job at hand. It's going to take you a long time, one, to look for it, and two, you're going to end up buying a machine that's really only doing half of what you need, or it's doing too much of what you need. And ultimately, that's costly.
With increasing mobility, people gravitate around most promising countries. This is valid for scientists as well. Jan believes that creating the ERC starting grant has been essential for Europe to strengthen its scientific role in the world.
Of course, the nice thing about the grant is that it offers new opportunities, and it made me decide to apply and therefore come to Europe. It has increased the possibilities for Europe. Interestingly enough, the people, at least in my field, that are in the US active are mainly Europeans. Maybe for some of them there's now an interest in coming back to some place in Europe, and these type of programs like ERC contribute to that.
In the past, Europe did not have an adequate tool to compete with other national science programs. This has now changed. With giving out individual grants worth up to 2 million euros over 5 years, the ERC offers excellent funding possibilities and a unique scientific environment.
One of the core values would be about freedom, intellectual freedom, and the means to do it, to achieve it. It's about creativity. It's about taking some risk also, and Europe needs to take more risk. If there is difference with the rest of the world, especially North America, there is a certain culture of risk-taking there, and we want in Europe to give a chance to the young generation to have a chance to take that up.
This is what Dr. Claire Vaillance is doing most of the time when she's not in the lab. Riding one of her 5 self-built bicycles through and around Oxford. Since childhood, she has been devoted to biking and asking questions. Now working as a physicist, these questions have become fundamental questions of natural science. To find the answers, Claire has constructed a next-generation mass spectrometer.
The different thing about this mass spectrometer is that as well as just getting masses for each fragment that you're looking at, it will also give you images. And those images contain information about how the molecule fragmented, or we can also use it for looking at imaging of surfaces.
A mass spectrometer is a machine that can determine the elemental composition of a sample. Claire's spectrometer uses a laser to ionize the molecules.
Machines have been around for a while where you could take a molecule, fragment it, record a spectrum like this, and then zoom in on one peak and take images like this. The difference with ours will be that we're using various ultra-fast cameras that will let us record images for every single one of these peaks, essentially in one go.
The ERC grant has given Claire the opportunity to do groundbreaking new research in the field of mass spectrometry in more than one aspect.
It's let me employ a postdoc, which is really helpful to help kind of run the lab on a sort of day-to-day level. And it's also given me 2 students over the next 2 years. And of course, it's given me all the money to buy the equipment to build this new mass spectrometer. So in 5 years' time, I'll be a lot further on than I am now. We'll have got this new instrument up and running. We'll have got a lot of data with it. We may even be well on the way to a commercializable instrument.
Claire especially hopes for an application in pharmaceutical science, for example, to identify infectious pathogens. Giulio Di Toro has a passion of its own, a passion to limit the disastrous outcome of what he has witnessed in Italy since childhood: earthquakes.
Well, this white rock is called Travertino, and it's a typical rock of this area east of Rome, and is the result of precipitation of minerals from fluids passing through faults that produced earthquakes.
Analyzing these rocks helps Giulio understand the mechanisms behind earthquakes that are especially disastrous in Europe.
The density of population is extremely high, so even a medium-sized earthquake can kill many people, like happened a few months ago in Aquila. So understanding the physics of earthquakes could be one of the fundamental parts to understand and maybe one day to predict earthquakes.
Here at the Italian National Seismographic Center, the alarm bells go off when it's already too late and the earth is already shaking. Giulio and his team have a different approach. They are constructing an earthquake simulator, enabling them to study earthquakes inside the lab.
It works in this way. There is a big engine here and a minor engine up here that transmit the rotary motion through this column to the sample. The piece of rock is located here. So it rotates like this. From the other side, there is a piston here that pushes the other piece of rock one against the other. So in this way, we are somehow reproducing what happened, for instance, during the Aquila earthquake with this machine.
Although European civilization has been plagued by earthquakes for thousands of years, Europe did not have an earthquake simulator to work with.
This will be the only apparatus in the world that can reproduce this condition, these extreme deformation conditions. This is why I really want this machine. And I really thank the European Union that gave me a chance to build it.
Up to now, the ERC has awarded grants worth 335 million euros to dedicated scientists like Jan, Claire or Giulio. A budget that makes research dreams become true.
Science never stops. It cannot stop. There is something compulsive about it. You have to do it. You know, you start with little something and you connect it with something which is maybe totally unrelated, and up, you get something totally new. And this is how you win a Nobel Prize in the end. If you have a bright idea and if you want to start an independent career, then apply to the ERC grant. And we will help you to realize your dream and to bring this great idea to life.